Hey guys, Justin Bryant here from selfmadesuccess.com. In this video, I'm going to teach you a skill that could be one of the most important skills you ever learn that I just kind of figured out very recently. So I've always been trying to figure out how to read a book a day, how to gather more intelligence, because if we have more intelligence, obviously we can accomplish a lot more. We can reach our potential much faster. We can separate ourselves from the pack much faster, and we can build incredible businesses, incredible bodies for ourselves, incredible lifestyles, relationships, etc. So, books are something that all successful people tend to swear by. They read books every day. They make a few minutes a day at least to read. I'm going to show you a way that you can read a book a day and actually understand it so that you can gather knowledge and start thinking like the most successful people in the world do, and actually consume and learn more information than most of them do, in fact, on a daily basis. So wherever you are, whatever level you're at right now, you can be a completely different, more advanced human being a year from now with this concept if you do it right. So the first thing you want to do if you want to read a book a day and actually understand the information is you don't need to read the whole thing word for word. One thing I realized that after reading dozens and dozens of books, self-help books, business books, marketing books, all these different things, specifically for helping myself become better and build better businesses. These books take forever to read. That's the problem. Many of these books, some of them were even 600 or 700 pages that I read, and they would take me months to get through because they are just so full of filler and stories and things like that. So turns out every book usually just has a few main lessons or a few breakthroughs, a few golden nuggets, however you want to word it, in each book. So you are looking for the 2, 3, 4 big lessons that you can learn from each book. And that is the main thing you're trying to get out of them. So you don't need to read the whole book word for word. That is one thing you need to get out of your head. In fact, what you're going to learn is how to pick out the most important points and know where to find them based on how the book is written. And pretty much every book especially nonfiction. This works best for nonfiction books. But if you want to become smarter, you're most likely going to be reading mostly nonfiction anyway. Now, for fiction, I don't see why you would even want to power read through a fiction book because it's probably for your entertainment and you probably want to enjoy it. But for nonfiction books, you don't want to read the whole thing. You want to know where the best information is, where the lessons are, and how to pick them out. So, number 2, books are so long because how are they going to sell a book for $20 or $30 or however much the book is if it's only like 10 pages long? So this was a really good point that I've heard Ty Lopez make. I don't know exactly what he does, but he talks about reading a book a day and all this stuff, and he tends to be pretty successful. You can look him up on YouTube. But I heard him in a video once, and he was like, yeah, these books are so long because how are they going to sell a book if it's only a few pages long, even though you can probably condense it all into a few pages. So you need to find the lessons that are within the book amidst all those pages of story after story, example after example after example, and fluff, background stories, all that stuff. So what you want to do is you only want to read the parts that typically have the lessons in them. So I'm going to show you exactly what those parts are. You want to read the front and back covers. You want to read the table of contents. You want to read the introduction. Typically, reading the introduction all the way through is a good thing just for background information of what exactly you're looking for. First and the last paragraph or page. You need to have a little flexibility here. Sometimes the first or last paragraph by itself isn't quite enough, depending on the writer, but for the most part, you will for sure get the concept if you read the last and first pages of the chapters. So many times you can get it from just one paragraph at the very beginning and at the very end of each chapter, but you may experiment with doing the whole page of each of those. But either way, you're going to be skipping a lot of pages that you really don't need to read right now. Also, the first and last paragraph of all these subheadings. So usually you have chapters and then you have like subheadings within the chapter in non-fiction books, like self-help books and things like that especially. So read the first and last paragraph or page of all the chapters, and then for each subheading, usually you can just read the first and last paragraph of each of those, or a couple of paragraphs. Usually in the first two and the last two paragraphs of subheadings, you can get the lesson you need from that. And then skim the pictures, because we process pictures very quickly and we understand pictures much easier than we do with words. You want to look at all the pictures, maybe even go back to them at some point. But these are what you're going to read. Front and back covers, table of contents, intro, first and last paragraph or page of all chapters, first and last paragraph of all subheadings, and then skim the pictures. So I'll show you an example. Unfortunately, I can't show you like the words within the book because of copyright problems, so I'm going to have all this stuff blurred out. One thing I want to say, I think Scribd.com, I think they have a pretty good program as far as books and kind of saving money on books. It's only like $10 a month or something like that, and you can get probably 4 or 5 books out of them per month for that cost. And they have a lot of the popular books that a lot of other subscriptions and even libraries don't have. I'll get more into that and where to get books later, but right now I'm going to use Scribd as an example because personally I like to do the digital version of a book. Before I was doing all audio books, but that doesn't really work with this style. So I recommend doing it this way if you're like me and you don't want to have an entire house cluttered with books and you don't want to buy 500 bookshelves. Because if you ever want to move or something, that's going to be a real pain. But if you like having the physical version of the book in your hand, that's fine too. You can just get that book. It'll probably be very easy to do this because it's very easy to flip pages and stuff with a physical book. But you have to wait for the shipping and you have to make sure you have enough room to stack all these books, or maybe you can just get rid of them when you're done. But if you want to ever go back and read them, you'll need to have a bookshelf for all of that stuff. So with this example, so you read the introduction, you read all that stuff. So I'll just kind of go through to the very beginning here. And like I said, I'm trying to avoid any kind of copyright problems. I can't just show you someone's book and the words in it. So you're only going to see blurred lines of words in here. But so you can read the front and the back of it. You might have a little summary type thing on the back of a physical book or on the inside of the main book, but it's not going to be that big of a deal whether you get the physical or the digital version. So you read the chapter, or you read the table of contents, and it'll tell you, a lot of times the table of contents will tell you everything you need to know. So I think it's okay to show you the table of contents, but you can do, it'll tell you like the introduction, chapter 1's about this, chapter 2's about this, chapter 3's about this. Usually you can see this just by going to Amazon and looking at the peek inside button on the book before you buy it. Usually you can see the table of contents in that part. So for instance, chapter 2 of this book, this is called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And chapter 1 is still not really sure how he came up with that. Weapons of, and then a big number. Chapter 2, reciprocation. Chapter 3, commitment and consistency. Chapter 4, social proof. Chapter 5, liking. Chapter 6, authority. Chapter 7, scarcity. Then he has an epilogue, notes, biography, all that stuff you usually don't even need to worry about. It's mostly just the main chapters and the introduction. So you go through that, you're done with that, you read through the introduction, so I'll kind of go through the introduction. It's very short, only a couple pages. Then you get to, chapter 1. Now, you may need to read the entire chapter 1 sometimes, kind of depending on the layout of the book, because many times chapter 1 will have the majority of the gold nuggets in it. But for the most part, as a general rule, there is flexibility in this. You can kind of make this your own strategy. I'm not saying you have to do it a certain way. I'm just giving you kind of a template for how I do it and how you might do it. But for instance, you might read this first paragraph here. I'll go ahead and circle it for you. You want to read the chapter, the name of the chapter. Here's the first paragraph. You could read the first page. Technically, a page on Scribd is half of what you're looking at here. I'm looking at this on a computer. So if you're on the app, this would probably be just one side of this. This is like a two-sided version where it shows you 2 pages at a time instead of one. So if you want to read the whole first page, this would be like the whole first page. Okay, you would read just this one half of it. All right, so you would read through that, then you go through, look for any subheadings or pictures. You see there's a lot of stuff in some of these books. Now see, this is kind of a subheading right here. It says Reader's Report, and he talks about some things that people who have read this book have noticed. But I found that, sometimes they'll do like a summary or like a testimonial at the end of each chapter. That's not something you really need to pay that much attention to. You have to use your own strategy, just kind of based off this template. Some books will be slightly different than others, but for the most part, this works for generally everything. So the last part of this chapter, you see chapter 2's right there. So the last page of this chapter is actually mostly like a testimonial type thing. But you always want to read the last paragraph before that subheading. So what you'll do is you'll read this part, or you'll read this whole page before the subheading, depending on how the writer does. But for the most part, paragraphs will do the job for you, and usually they sum up a chapter at the last paragraph. So then you go to the next chapter, okay? So you do it again. You read the chapter, you read the title of the chapter. A lot of them start with quotes. I've noticed that's becoming more popular. There's the first paragraph right there, the first page, if you go all the way down. And you've read that, so then you go through. Okay, there's a subheading, so what you want to do, you might read this paragraph here. You have the subheading. You read this first paragraph under that subheading. And then you want to go and find either the next subheading or the end of the chapter. So there's the next subheading right here. And so you would read this paragraph because the subheading is right here. Okay, so once you've done that, you keep going. You do the same for each one. You read the first and last of the subheading. There's the last paragraph of that one. And I have actually used that on this book, and it works very well. So there's a subheading there. You read this first paragraph. I'm not going to, go over every single chapter like this because I think you probably get the idea about now. Then you read this one, the last paragraph. Before the next subheading, you read this one because that's the first of that subheading. And some of these chapters, you'll notice these chapters in this book, it only has like 7 main chapters. These chapters are ridiculously long. So many books are like this. They'll either have like 25 or 30 short chapters, or they'll have like 5 or 10 really long chapters. So you'll read this paragraph, of course, and this one. But you notice that I'm skipping over a lot of stuff. But for the most part, that stuff is just examples, it's just background, and even if they have some gold nuggets in there, they usually sum it up at the last paragraph. So, you're reading these 2 paragraphs here because there's another subheading. That's actually a reader's report, which basically is like a testimonial. And you don't even really need to pay attention to that. So now I'm on to chapter 3. Okay, so that shows you how that works. That's how you basically read it. You read the end of the book, especially if you have the physical version, you read the back of the book before you even open it, and the front. And if there's any pictures, which this book I'm using as an example doesn't really have very many pictures in it, if any at all. I don't really recall seeing any in this book. But subheadings, they use quite a bit. Chapters, of course. You read the whole intro, which is usually a couple pages, and that's it. Table of contents takes like 2 seconds. Front and back covers takes very little time. So that's basically how it works. Number 4, you want to take notes and highlight the lessons you learned. So there are apps for doing this if you want to do it completely digital, or I tend to like taking notes by hand. So what I do is I'll show you kind of what it's loosely based on. So there's a page on the Tim Ferriss blog at tim.blog, tim.blog. And the Tim Ferriss Show, you've probably heard of it. He basically interviews very successful people in all areas of study, all areas of life, and then tries to break down habits that they have, tools they use, so that we can make our lives better based on what they do. But one thing he's very good at too is taking notes. So he takes notes during interviews, he takes notes during seminars, he takes notes from books. He's very big on taking notes because that's one of the best ways to learn. So you'll notice that he has a page here, and I'll have a link to this for you, but you can just look it up in Google. How to take notes like an alpha geek plus my $2,600 date plus challenge. Now, you don't need to worry about that last part of it, the date and the challenge, but the notes part about the alpha geek, that's kind of where I got some of the ideas for how I take notes from. So I want to give him a lot of credit. Him, kind of a combination of the idea of taking notes a certain way plus reading a book a day, came from the combination of, things I've learned from Tim Ferriss, things I've learned from Tai Lopez, things I've learned from other people around the internet, and just constantly researching ways, because I figured the smarter I can get, the faster I can get. And if other people do this as well, we can solve a lot more problems a lot faster. We can build better lives for ourselves a lot faster, and we can get to the next level much faster. So this is a great kind of idea for taking notes. There are a few things that I've changed that I think are a little better than the way he does it. In my opinion, it works better for me. You might look at this, you might look at the way I do it, and then figure out what works best for you. Like I said, this is a very flexible template. You don't have to do it in a very rigid style. It's not like a diet where you can only do certain things and you can't do the others. I don't care. I'm just trying to help you learn. So what I do is I get something like these 3-ring binders, typically just 1 inch thick, and I like to divide up notes for books in these types of binders. So they're very cheap. You can get 4 of them for like $9 on Amazon. And then you fill them, of course, with the 3-ring paper, 200 sheets for like $3 or $4, very cheap. And it makes it good for taking notes. You know, you have the lines to keep you where you need to be writing. You can easily take pieces of paper in and out and reorganize them in your binders instead of just buying a notebook. Like, I think that's what Tim Ferriss does. Instead of getting a notebook, I do this because you can go back later on, change the page numbers, and change the organization of your binders. Maybe you'll have a binder after you've read a bunch of books in a certain category. You might want to start categorizing binders, notes on certain types of books. So you might have like a self-help binder. You might have like a health and fitness binder. You might have a binder about relationships and things you've learned from books about relationships. So you can rearrange them much easier because you can just open up your binder, open up the rings, take the paper out, close the rings, go to a different section of the binder, open the rings, put the paper in, close it, maybe change some page numbers, and that's it. So I'm going to show you kind of what this looks like just real quick. So what you would do on, let's say this is a regular piece of paper, you're taking notes, and the reason you're taking notes is because you learn much faster and you retain information much easier when you're taking notes. So that's why I take notes. Typically I do it by hand. You can do it digitally. I've done that before. I've tried copy and paste. I've tried a lot of different ways. You can even highlight, but writing them down by hand seems to help me retain information the best. So a typical page when you're taking notes, you would have the chapter, or you would start obviously with the name of the book. So the title of the book, and I'm trying to draw with a mouse right now, so bear with me. And then I would have the who it's by, and then their name. So then you would start usually your intro, and then you would do, some bullet points. And of course, you're using the way I taught you how to read the book. So you got your intro, then you skip a line, chapter 1, and then the name of the chapter, blah, 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 blah. Typically, I'll underline that. And then bullet points. And then you can have, of course, subheadings. If you have a subheading, I'll keep that at the same margin as the bullet points. So this would be like, let's say you start a subheading. I would have a sub here. And then I would do like a different symbol for the next bullet point, and then I would push that over a little bit. So it's kind of like an outline. All right. So then you would have your other bullet points that's specifically for that subheading, and then until you get to the next subheading. And then you just skip a line every time you skip chapters. But then you would have that, I typically do that all in pen. So this is in pen, okay? Ink whatever you want to call it. But the page number itself, I'll change the color for it. The page number, because you're in a binder and you want to change the page numbers, you might want to, let's say, so you'll have that like in the right corner, because the way you open a notebook is the page numbers will be easily visible from the right. So in the right corner, you'll have the page numbers once your binder is situated the way you want it to be. But you want to do that in pencil, okay? So, you know, it looks like a D, but you're doing this in pencil because you'll probably want to erase it later on. So you'll want to erase it later on if you want to rearrange your books, because your page numbers won't matter, and you can't really erase ink. So you can do your notes in ink. That's perfectly fine. I tend to do it that way, but then I do my page numbers in pencil in the top right corner. And then you also want to have a table of contents. Typically you want to do that. You can do that in ink and then do the page numbers of the table of contents in pencil. So if I were to clear this, it would be the chapters. So then you'd have like the chapter 1, chapter 2, and the title of those. And then typically you have like dots and then the page number. But you want the page number to always be in pencil. So, you know, you'll have something like this, and then this will be like 10. So you basically want to do your notes like a book is situated, but you want to be strategic about giving yourself the versatility of page numbers, being able to rearrange in these binders that I showed you with regular 3-ring paper, and use page numbers in pencil. You can write in pencil or ink, however you want to do your notes. I do it by hand. That's how I take notes. That's how I retain information. And because of the way you're reading, you read extremely fast. So you can get through a book in a day very easily, within, 30 minutes, within an hour, within a couple hours, depending on how long the book is and depending on how far in depth that you want to go. Now, you can always go back and read the book if you want all the way through, but typically with a nonfiction book like a self-help or something that talks about principles or concepts that will make you smarter or teach you something, you typically won't need to go back and read it. So this works very well. So take notes. That's kind of how I do it. I know it wasn't the prettiest example, but you basically have, like I said, you have your title, who it's by, then you have the name of the chapter, your bullet points. If you have a subheading, that'll be one of your bullet points, and then you have bullet points for the subheading. Then you do get to the next subheading, you have bullet points for that. Then you get to the next chapter, okay? And then you just do it like that, and then you do your page numbers in pencil, okay? Page numbers in pencil, the rest you can do in ink if you want. But never do your page numbers in the top right corner in ink, alright? So that'll really help you out as far as notes. And like I said, reference the Tim Ferriss method, how to take notes like an alpha geek, on tim.blog. And last but not least is the whole part of obtaining books. Now, if you can read a book a day, that's 30 books a month on average, and that can get very expensive. So I've just kind of developed this method. I've tried it. It works very well. It helps you get much smarter, helps you retain lessons from books much better. But I have not figured out exactly the most efficient way of buying books. Now, you can buy books just on Kindle every time. Kindle versions tend to be a little cheaper than the physical versions, of course. or the audio versions. So you might do it that way, but if you're buying books all the time and you're only taking 30 minutes to an hour to get through the whole book, then it seems kind of like a waste of money, where it really isn't a waste of money, especially if you have your own business. Like I have my own business, I can write off the expenses of books and get a little bit of that money back, but it's still very expensive even with write-offs for taxes. So if you come up with a good way for buying books in bulk, the bestsellers, the stuff that people really want to read, then let us know in the comments, because that can be very helpful to people watching this video or reading this as a blog post, and that could make a huge difference for people watching this as well as myself, because I'm always trying to look to make this more efficient. But really, reading it, pretty much have that down. Like I showed you how to do that, and then taking notes works very well for me. I don't see much reason to change that. Of course, it's going to be a little different for everybody else, but it's a flexible template. And as far as buying books and keeping expenses down, I mean, you could try Overdrive, which I have done. I will be honest, I've not had a great experience with Overdrive, because you still have to actually check out the book even though it's a digital version. So it doesn't make much sense to me to do that, because all the books I wanted were always checked out. Now if you're in a major city, well, even in a major city, I mean, I'm not far from one, and I still couldn't get most of the books I wanted. So a lot of times you can use the library near you in the nearest major city, and you still can't get the books you want because they're always checked out, even if it's a digital version. So Overdrive, of course, is free. A library card is free, but it didn't work out for me that well as far as getting books and getting them quickly. You can try Kindle Unlimited, which allows you to pay like $10 a month and get a lot more reading. I will probably try that and maybe do a review in the future to see if they actually have the bestsellers and the books you actually want, or if they just have a bunch of, okay books that don't really teach you as much. One thing I do like I've showed you, is Scribd. Now, Scribd is a great way to do things. You can look at Scribd here. Scribd, it's like $10 a month, but they do have a lot of the best sellers in there. So you can save pretty good money using Scribd, but they're not going to have everything. So you might need something to go along with Scribd. But if you come up with better ways to get books affordably so that we can get more people to read a book a day, to get people watching these videos to be smarter and to make a big impact on the world and be able to do whatever you want to do, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to get your ideas. So if you got something from this video, if you feel like you learned something that can really help you, if you feel like you learned how to read books faster, please like and subscribe so I can create more videos like this for you. Also, if you want to let me know what you thought about the video, or if you came up with some other strategies to go along with this, like some great ways to find books cheaper, or some better ways of taking notes and things like that, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you and add to this topic. And also, I'll have some of the, or all of the notes, links, and related content to this video on a show notes page at selfmadesuccess.com within the coming days, and you can look for that there, or I'll have a link in the description for you. So other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great day.